The great chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with quiet conversation. Representatives from 43 different species sat in their designated seats, each area designed for their specific biology. Some breathed different gases, others needed special gravity fields, but all of them were here for the same reason. Ambassador Krell of the Velthari Empire had demanded an emergency session. Minho sat in the human section, his dark suit crisp and professional. He had been Earth's ambassador for 3 years now. In that time, he had negotiated trade agreements, settled minor disputes, and generally kept humanity's profile low. That was the strategy. Stay quiet. Stay peaceful. Let the galaxy get used to humans slowly. But today felt different. Minho could sense it in the way the other ambassadors whispered, in the way they kept glancing at the human section with something that looked like pity. The council chamber doors opened with a deep boom. Ambassador Krell entered and the room fell silent. The Velthari were massive creatures standing nearly 3 meters tall. Their scales were deep purple, and their eyes glowed with a faint yellow light. Krell wore the traditional war crest of his people, a clear message to everyone present. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Krell's voice rumbled through the chamber's translation system. I come before you today to declare the Velthari Empire's intentions toward the human species. Minho felt his stomach tighten. He had suspected this was coming. Border incidents with Velthari scouts had been increasing for months. Human colony ships kept finding Velthari markers on worlds they were surveying. But he had hoped diplomacy could solve it. Krell continued. The humans occupy 17 systems in the Outer Rim. These systems contain resources vital to the Empire's expansion. We have attempted to negotiate purchase agreements. The humans have refused. We have offered them alternative territories. They have refused. Now we will take what we need. A screen appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed footage of human civilian vessels near the border. When Velthari military ships approached, the human ships turned and left the area. Krell gestured to the images. As you can see, humanity lacks the courage to defend even their own space. They run from the mere sight of our vessels. They are a weak species playing at being spacefaring. The Empire will remove them from these systems within 6 months. We present this as notification, not as a request for approval. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some species looked uncomfortable. Others seemed almost amused. The Velthari had conquered 47 systems in the past century. They had never lost a war. This seemed like it would be another easy victory for them. Minho stood slowly. The chamber's attention turned to him. He was not an imposing figure compared to many species present. Humans were average height, average strength, average in almost every physical way. But Minho had something else in his expression. Something that made a few of the older ambassadors lean forward with interest. Ambassador Krell. Minho's voice was calm, almost gentle. Those civilian vessels retreated because we have protocols. When unarmed ships encounter military vessels from potentially hostile powers, they withdraw. It is basic safety procedure. You are mistaking caution for cowardice. Krell's eyes glowed brighter. I mistake nothing, human. Your species has been in space for barely 200 years. You have never waged war beyond your own star system. You build more trade ships than warships. You are merchants and farmers pretending to be equals among true powers. Minho nodded slowly. We do prefer trade to war. This is true. We have tried very hard to be peaceful neighbors since joining the galactic community. We studied the Council's history. We saw how many species destroyed themselves through endless conflict. We decided to choose a different path. A weak path, Krell said with obvious contempt. A chosen path, Minho corrected. There is a difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. I strongly encourage you to reconsider this action. We do not want conflict with the Velthari Empire, but we will defend our colonies and our people. Krell laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Several other ambassadors joined in. The Velthari had battleships that could crack planets. They had conquered species far more advanced than humanity appeared to be. What could humans possibly do to stop them? The Empire has made its decision, Krell announced. Consider this a formal declaration. Humanity has 1 week to begin evacuating the 17 disputed systems. After that, any human presence will be treated as hostile and removed by force. Minho stood quietly for a moment. He looked around the chamber at all the different species. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked indifferent. A few looked eager to see what would happen. None of them offered support. The Council's laws were clear. They did not interfere in territorial disputes unless both sides requested mediation. The Velthari clearly were not requesting anything. 1 week, Minho said finally. Very well. But Ambassador Krell, I want you to remember this moment. I want this entire council to remember. Humanity offered peace. Humanity offered negotiation. Humanity offered compromise. You chose war instead, Krell snorted. Your words mean nothing, little human. In 6 months your people will be gone from the outer rim, and the galaxy will forget you were ever there. Minho picked up his data pad and prepared to leave the chamber. But he paused at the door and turned back. You are making a mistake you will not recover from. I say this not as a threat. I say it as a warning from someone who knows my own species better than you do. We tried very hard to leave our worst instincts behind when we reached for the stars. You are about to remind us why we had to try so hard in the first place. With that, Minho walked out. The chamber erupted in conversation behind him. Most of it sounded like speculation about how quickly the Velthari would win. Some of the ambassadors were already making bets. Alone in the hallway, Minho activated his communicator. Captain Hana answered immediately from the human diplomatic vessel in orbit. I heard everything through the comlink, Hana said quietly. Are we really doing this? We do not have a choice, Minho replied. Get me a secure line to Earth, Priority Alpha. To the Defense Council? Hana asked. No, Minho said, his voice heavy. To Jiho at Defense Intelligence. And to Admiral Doyen. If the Velthari want to see what humans are really capable of, we will show them. But I want every diplomatic channel kept open. When they realize their mistake, we need to be ready to end this quickly. Understood, Hana said. Minho, are we going to win this? Minho thought about human history, about all the wars humans had fought against each other over thousands of years, about all the weapons they had developed, about all the tactics they had learned, about all the blood that had been spilled before humanity finally decided to reach for peace instead of conquest. Yes, he said quietly. We are going to win. I just hope the Velthari realize that before we have to show them how humans truly fight. The communication ended. Minho stood in the empty hallway of the Galactic Council building, surrounded by species who thought they understood what was about to happen. None of them did, not even close. The countdown had begun. 3 weeks after the declaration, the Velthari warfleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the new Jeju system. 200 warships, their hulls dark and threatening against the stars. It was the largest single battle group the Velthari had assembled in 30 years. They were sending a message. Humanity would be crushed completely. On the bridge of the flagship Conqueror's Pride, Fleet Commander Zolth studied the tactical display. New Jeju was a farming colony, home to about 2 million humans. Intelligence reports showed minimal military presence. 30 orbital defense platforms and maybe a dozen small patrol craft. This would be over in hours. All ships prepare for assault formation, Zolth ordered. Target the defense platforms first. Once they are destroyed, we will broadcast surrender terms to the planet's surface. The fleet moved forward, confident and steady. They had done this dozens of times before. Other species always surrendered once they saw Velthari might. Surely humans would be no different. On New Jeju's orbital defense station Alpha, Commander Sora watched the approaching fleet. She was a small woman by human standards, but her eyes held a fierce determination. She had served in the colony defense force for 15 years. She had trained for this moment even though she hoped it would never come. All platforms, this is Alpha Command. Sora spoke into the communication system. Weapons free. Fire at will. Make every shot count. The defense platforms opened fire. Missiles streaked across space. Energy beams lanced out toward the Velthari fleet. The first wave of shots destroyed 3 Velthari ships immediately. Zolth jerked in surprise. That was more accurate than intelligence had suggested. Return fire, Zolth commanded. Destroy those platforms. The Velthari fleet fired back. Their weapons were powerful, designed to crack through heavy armor. 6 defense platforms exploded in the first volley, but the remaining platforms kept firing, and their tactics were strange. The platforms were moving. Not much, but enough to throw off targeting solutions, and their weapons were adjusting. Each shot seemed smarter than the last, finding weak points in Velthari shields. Zolth had never seen defensive systems that adapted this quickly. What are they doing? Zolth's tactical officer asked, confusion in his voice. They are learning, Zolth said slowly. Their computers are analyzing our shields and adjusting their weapons in real time. More Velthari ships took damage. Not enough to stop the fleet, but enough to worry Zolth. By the time the last defense platform was destroyed, the Velthari had lost 18 ships, 18, against fixed defenses. But the worst was yet to come. As the Velthari ships moved toward planetary orbit, human ships appeared. Not the civilian vessels that had run before. These were warships smaller than Velthari vessels, but fast. So fast. Admiral Doyen commanded the human defense fleet from the bridge of the battleship Indomitable. He was an older man, his hair gray, but his mind still sharp. He had studied Velthari tactics for months, ever since the border incidents began. He knew exactly how they fought. All ships, attack pattern Delta, Doyen ordered calmly. Hit them from multiple angles. Do not let them concentrate fire. The human ships swarmed like angry insects. They were outnumbered, but they fought with a fury that shocked the Velthari. Human ships would fire, then dodge, then fire again from a different angle. When they took damage, they kept fighting. When they were about to be destroyed, they rammed Velthari vessels instead of retreating. Zolth watched in growing horror as his fleet took losses. 20 ships became 30. 30 became 40. The humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to make the Velthari pay for every meter of space. Pull back to reform formation, Zolth ordered. We need to... An alarm blared. 3 human ships had broken through the defensive perimeter. They were heading straight for the Conqueror's Pride on a collision course. Evasive maneuvers, Zolth shouted. The flagship turned, but it was too slow. 2 of the human ships exploded against its shields. The third one rammed directly into the ship's engineering section. The explosion tore through 3 decks. Conqueror's Pride survived, but it was badly damaged. Those pilots, the tactical officer whispered. They knew they would die. They did it anyway. Zolth had no answer. He had fought many species. He had seen courage before, but he had never seen this. This was not courage. This was something else. Something that made his scales crawl with an unfamiliar feeling. Fear. The battle continued for 6 more hours. Eventually, the human fleet was destroyed. Eventually, the Velthari fleet established orbit over New Jeju. But the cost had been terrible. 68 Velthari warships destroyed or so damaged they had to withdraw. More than in the last 10 campaigns combined. Zolth ordered landing forces to the planet's surface. Surely the ground battle would be easier. Surely the humans would see reason now. Sora had survived when her defense platform was destroyed. She had made it to an escape pod and landed on the planet's surface. Within hours, she had gathered survivors and organized them into combat units. By the time Velthari troops landed, humanity was ready. The Velthari were bigger and stronger than humans. Their weapons were powerful. Their armor was thick, but they were not ready for what humans did. Humans did not fight fair. They did not line up and exchange fire. They hid in buildings and fired from windows. They planted traps in streets. They attacked at night when Velthari night vision was poorest. They used civilian vehicles as bombs. They fought with a savage creativity that no military manual could prepare for. When Velthari soldiers captured a position, humans would attack it from behind an hour later. When Velthari forces tried to set up supply lines, humans would cut them. When Velthari commanders tried to negotiate, humans would attack during the talks. Sora led her forces from the ruins of the capital city. She had 2,000 soldiers against 20,000 Velthari. The odds did not matter. Every human knew what was at stake. This was their home. Their families had evacuated, but this was still their world. They are not soldiers, one Velthari officer told Zolth after a week of ground combat. They are demons. They do not stop. They do not surrender. Yesterday, we cornered a group of 50 humans. We offered them their lives if they would lay down weapons. They charged us instead. All 50 died, but they took 200 of our soldiers with them. Zolth stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship and looked down at New Jeju. The planet was mostly under Velthari control now, but it had taken 2 weeks instead of 2 days, and it had cost him another 12 ships to support the ground forces. Across the Galactic Council, observers watched in stunned silence. They had expected an easy Velthari victory. Instead, they saw humans fighting with a desperation and skill that shocked everyone. Intelligence agencies began pulling files on human history. What they found made them very uncomfortable. Minho received reports from New Jeju while he was still at the council building. He read about Sora's last stand in the capital. She had held out for 16 days before finally being overwhelmed. The Velthari had captured her, but only after she had led the defense that cost them thousands of troops. The council wanted to speak with him, but Minho was busy. He was coordinating with Jiho and the intelligence services. He was working with Yuna and the research division. He was helping Admiral Doyen plan the next phase, because New Jeju was not the end. It was just the beginning. The Velthari had won the battle, but they were about to discover something terrifying. When you wound humanity but do not destroy it completely, it does not weaken. It gets angry. And angry humans were the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. 4 months into the war, the Galactic Council assigned observer Thelvan to analyze the conflict. Thelvan was from a species that valued knowledge above all else. His kind had been observers of galactic events for thousands of years. He approached every situation with cold, scientific curiosity. At first, Thelvan thought this would be a simple assignment. Document the Velthari conquest. Write a report. Move on to the next observation. But as he studied the data, something did not make sense. The Velthari had taken 4 human colony worlds now. New Jeju, New Busan, Sejong Station, and Hanyang Outpost. 4 victories, but each one cost them more than the last. At New Jeju, they lost 68 ships. At New Busan, 93. At Sejong, 112. At Hanyang, 147. The Velthari fleet was dying. Not from losses in single battles, but from the accumulated cost of every victory. And the humans were not slowing down. If anything, they were getting more dangerous. Thelvan began digging deeper into human records. What he found disturbed him greatly. Jiho sat in the Defense Intelligence headquarters deep beneath the surface of Earth. Screens covered every wall, showing data from across human space. He had not slept properly in weeks, but sleep could wait. Right now, humanity needed information. Status report, Jiho said to his team. Civilian evacuation from border systems is 97% complete, one analyst reported. The remaining 3% have volunteered to stay as part of resistance cells. Industrial conversion? Jiho asked, exceeding projections. We have converted 62% of civilian manufacturing to military production. Shipyards are working around the clock. We are producing ships faster than the Velthari can destroy them. Jiho nodded. This was the key. Humans had learned long ago that wars were won not just on battlefields but in factories and shipyards. While the Velthari celebrated their victories, humanity was building the fleet that would crush them. What about Project Teguk? Jiho asked quietly. The room fell silent. Project Teguk was classified at the highest level. Even most government officials did not know about it. It was humanity's answer to the Velthari invasion, the project that would change everything. Admiral Doyen reports the first wave will be ready in 2 months, the analyst said. The second wave 1 month after that. Jiho allowed himself a small smile. The Velthari thought they were fighting a defensive war. They had no idea what was coming. Across human space, something remarkable was happening. Yuna worked in the Advanced Warfare Research Division on Mars. Her team had been given a simple mission. Study Velthari technology. Learn from it. Improve on it. They were succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. Every Velthari ship that humanity destroyed became a learning opportunity. Human recovery teams would salvage the wreckage. Yuna's scientists would analyze every system, every weapon, every piece of technology. Then they would make it better. Velthari shields were strong but slow to adapt. Human scientists designed shields that could change frequency in microseconds. Velthari weapons were powerful but energy inefficient. Human scientists created weapons that hit just as hard, but could fire 3 times as long. Velthari engines were fast. Human engines became faster. We are not just matching them, Yuna told her team during one late-night session. We are surpassing them. Every day we get better. Every day they stay the same. Back at the Galactic Council, Thelvan was reaching troubling conclusions. He had spent weeks reading human historical records. What he found should have terrified the Council when humans first applied for membership. Humans had been at war for their entire recorded history. Not occasional wars. Constant wars. According to their own records, humanity had been completely at peace for only about 300 years out of the last 10,000. The rest of the time, humans were fighting each other somewhere on their planet. Thelvan read about wars that killed millions, about weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. About tactics so brutal they had to be banned by human international agreements. About soldiers who fought in conditions that would kill most species. About civilians who resisted occupation for decades. He read about something called guerrilla warfare, where weaker forces would use terrain and surprise to defeat stronger enemies. He read about something called total war, where entire societies mobilized for conflict. He read about something called nuclear deterrence, where humans built weapons that could destroy their own planet just to prevent others from using similar weapons. The more Thelvan read, the more afraid he became. Humanity had tried to hide this history when joining the Council, not because they were ashamed, but because they knew other species would fear them. They had wanted to be accepted as peaceful neighbors, and the Velthari had forced them to remember what they really were. Thelvan brought his findings to the Council in a closed session. The chamber was silent as he presented his data. Images of human history flashed on screens. Battles, weapons, destruction on a scale most species could not imagine. The Velthari believed humans were weak because they did not see human weapons. Thelvan explained, but humans have the most advanced weapons because they have spent the most time developing them. They have weapons they choose not to use, not because they cannot build them, but because they decided such weapons were too terrible. An ambassador from the Krell Confederation spoke up. But surely the Velthari military is still superior. They have conquered dozens of systems. Thelvan displayed new data. The Velthari have lost 420 ships in 4 months. In their previous century of conquest, they lost a total of 312 ships. Humanity is destroying the Velthari fleet faster than the Velthari can replace it, and human industrial capacity is accelerating. The council chamber erupted in shocked conversation. This was not supposed to be happening. The Velthari were the galaxy's premier military power. How could humans be winning? There is something else, Thelvan continued. I analyzed human psychological profiles. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. They would chase prey for days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. This mentality still exists in their military thinking. They do not expect quick victories. They expect long struggles, and they never give up. An older ambassador, one who had served on the council for decades, spoke quietly. How many words do humans have for war? Thelvan checked his data. In their various languages, 187 distinct words, plus thousands of words for tactics, weapons, strategies, and military concepts. The chamber fell silent. 187 words for war. Most species had 3 or 4. Humans had created an entire vocabulary just to describe different types of conflict. Minho entered the council chamber. He had been summoned to explain humanity's military actions. He walked to the human section calmly, his expression neutral. Ambassador Minho, the council leader said, we are concerned about the escalating violence of this conflict. Both sides have suffered significant casualties. The council urges both humanity and the Velthari to seek peace. Minho stood. The Velthari declared war on humanity. They invaded our colonies. They killed our people. We offered peace before the war began. They refused. We cannot accept peace now while they still occupy our worlds. But surely accommodation can be reached, another ambassador said. Perhaps humanity can cede some territory in exchange for peace. Minho's expression hardened. No. The Velthari wanted to see what humanity was capable of. Now they are finding out. This war will end when our colonies are liberated and when the Velthari agree to terms that ensure they never threaten us again. That sounds like you. Intend to conquer the Velthari. The council leader said with alarm. No, Minho corrected. We intend to defeat them. There is a difference. We do not want their territory. We do not want to rule them. We want them to leave us alone. But they need to understand the cost of attacking humanity. We tried to warn you. We tried to warn them. You all chose not to listen. Minho looked around the chamber at all the different species. You thought we were weak because we chose peace. You could not imagine that a species might be capable of war but simply decide not to practice it. The Velthari made that same mistake. Now they are learning the truth, and soon the rest of the galaxy will learn it too. With that, Minho sat down. The council chamber buzzed with worried conversation. For the first time, many species were wondering if they had badly misjudged humanity, and they were starting to fear what would happen when the humans finally stopped defending and started attacking. 6 months after the war began, Admiral Doyen stood on the bridge of the new flagship Victory's Edge. Around him, The largest human fleet ever assembled hung in space like a metal cloud. 300 warships, not the small patrol craft the Velthari had faced at the start of the war. These were true warships built specifically to fight and win. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Doyen. He spoke into the communication system. Today we launch Operation Teguk. We have spent 6 months preparing, 6 months learning, 6 months building. The Velthari think they are winning because they hold 4 of our colonies. They are wrong. Today we take everything back, and we make sure they never threaten humanity again. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel. Their target was not the occupied colonies. It was something much more important. They were going straight to Velthari territory, to the industrial worlds that built their ships, to the systems that supplied their empire. The Velthari had made a classic mistake. They had pushed forward, conquering human colonies, but they had left their own territory lightly defended. They assumed humans would defend desperately, not attack aggressively. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Taiyang sat in the cockpit of his fighter, one of 200 similar craft launching from the human carriers. The new Guangaito-class fighters were beautiful machines, faster than anything the Velthari had, more maneuverable, more deadly. Yuna's research division had designed them specifically to counter Velthari tactics. All fighters, this is Strike Leader Taiyang, he said to his wing. Remember your training. The Velthari still think they are superior. Show them they are wrong. The human fleet emerged at the edge of the Krelvar system. Krelvar Prime was the industrial heart of the Velthari Empire. Massive shipyards orbited the planet. Factories on the surface produced weapons and armor. This was where Velthari military power was born, and humanity was about to destroy it. The Velthari defense fleet numbered about 80 ships. Good ships, but caught completely by surprise. They had not expected a human attack. Not here, not now. The defense commander scrambled to organize a response, but it was already too late. Taeyang's fighter wing screamed across space. Velthari point defense systems tried to track them but could not keep up. The fighters were too fast, too unpredictable. They fired missiles that wove through defensive fire like they were alive, which in a way they were. Human missiles had adaptive AI that learned from every near miss and adjusted trajectory in real time. The first Velthari defense platform exploded, then another. Then 5 more in rapid succession. Taeyang's wing reformed and made another attack run. His targeting computer was linked to every other fighter in the fleet. They shared data constantly, each ship learning from what every other ship experienced. It was coordination the Velthari could not match. Admiral Doyun watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. The human fleet moved like a living thing, each ship knowing exactly where every other ship was. When Velthari ships tried to focus fire on one target, 2 other human ships would hit them from different angles. When Velthari commanders tried to reform their defensive lines, human ships would slip through gaps before the lines could close. This was not the desperate defense the Velthari had faced at New Jeju. This was humans fighting the way they had learned to fight over thousands of years, with coordination, with tactics, with brutal efficiency. Captain Hana commanded a squadron of 12 warships. Her mission was to take out the shipyards. She approached her target with her ships in tight formation, shields overlapping for maximum protection. Velthari fire splashed against their defenses, but the human shields held. Yuna's improvements worked perfectly. All ships target the construction berths, Hana ordered. We want those shipyards destroyed completely. Her ships fired in unison. Missiles and energy beams tore into the massive orbital facilities. Secondary explosions rippled through the shipyards as fuel stores and ammunition depots cooked off. Within minutes, the facilities that had been building Velthari warships were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. On the planet's surface, Commander Sora led the marine assault. She had been rescued from Velthari captivity 3 months earlier, when human special forces raided the prison camp. Now she was back in combat, and she had a score to settle. Human dropships descended through the atmosphere, shrugging off ground-based fire. The Velthari had never faced a ground assault on their own territory. They had always been the invaders, never the invaded. Their defensive doctrine was not prepared for what humans brought. Sora's Marines hit the ground running, literally. They wore powered armor that let them move at inhuman speeds. Velthari soldiers, big and strong as they were, could not react fast enough. Human tactics that had proven so effective on New Jeju now played out on Velthari soil. Secure the command center, Sora ordered her team. I want their planetary defense grid offline within the hour. Her Marines moved through the industrial complex like ghosts. Velthari security forces tried to stop them, but humans had spent 6 months studying Velthari military doctrine. They knew every tactic. They had planned counters for everything. Within 3 hours, Krelvar Prime's planetary defenses were destroyed. Within 6 hours, every shipyard in orbit was gone. Within 12 hours, the Velthari defense fleet was reduced to scattered survivors fleeing the system. The industrial heart of the Velthari Empire had been ripped out, but Admiral Doyon was not done. Operation Taguk was not just one attack. It was 15 simultaneous attacks across Velthari territory. Every major industrial system, every fleet base, every supply depot, all hit at the same time by human forces that had been quietly building for months. The Galactic Council watched in stunned disbelief. The species that had seemed barely able to defend its colonies had just launched the most coordinated military operation the galaxy had seen in centuries. And it was working. Thelvan sat in the council observation room, his earlier reports now seeming prophetic. He had warned them that humanity was more dangerous than it appeared. But even he had not fully grasped the truth. Humans were not just good at war. They were masters of it. Every tactic, every strategy, every weapon they used showed the refinement of thousands of years of practice. Ambassador Krell of the Velthari Empire was summoned to an emergency council session. He arrived looking shaken, his scales dull with stress. The arrogant confidence of 6 months ago was completely gone. The human fleet has destroyed 17 of our major facilities, Krell reported, his voice hollow. They have wiped out 60% of our military production capability. Our fleets are scattered and unable to coordinate. They are not fighting like prey anymore. They are fighting like apex predators, Minho finished, entering the chamber. Which is what we are, Ambassador Krell. You simply could not see it before. The council chamber fell silent. Minho stood in his usual spot, but something about him was different. There was a hardness in his expression that had not been there 6 months ago. Or perhaps it had always been there, just hidden behind diplomatic courtesy. The Velthari Empire stands ready to negotiate, Krell said, the words clearly painful for him. We seek an immediate ceasefire. No, Minho said simply. Shock rippled through the chamber. No? The council leader asked. But surely humanity does not seek to continue this bloodshed unnecessarily. We do not seek bloodshed, Minho corrected. We seek victory. Complete victory. The Velthari wanted war. They rejected our peace. They invaded our colonies. They killed our people. Now they will face the consequences of those choices. There will be no ceasefire until Velthari military forces withdraw from all human territory, until they disarm their offensive fleets, until they accept terms that ensure this never happens again. Those are conquerors' terms, Krell said with shock. No, Minho replied. Those are survivors' terms, terms designed to make sure humanity does not have to fight this war again in 20 years. You brought this on yourselves. 6 months ago, you laughed at me when I warned you. You called humans weak, cowardly. You thought our peace was weakness. Now you know the truth. Our peace was a choice, a gift to the galaxy. You rejected that gift. You chose to see what we are really capable of. Are you satisfied with what you found? Krell had no answer. Around the chamber, ambassadors from other species shifted uncomfortably. Many of them had watched the Velthari Declaration 6 months ago with amusement. None of them were amused now. Admiral Doyen's voice came through Minho's communicator. All objectives in the first wave are secured. Ready for second wave on your command. Minho looked at Krell. You have 24 hours to begin withdrawing from human territory. If your forces are still in our space after that time, the second wave begins. And I promise you, Ambassador, you do not want to see what the second wave involves. With that, Minho left the chamber. The Velthari Empire had wanted to test humanity. The test was not going the way they had hoped. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so full. Every species had sent their ambassadors. Many had sent additional observers. What was about to happen would reshape galactic politics for generations. Everyone knew it. Everyone wanted to witness it firsthand. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Krell of the Velthari Empire. But he was not the confident warrior who had declared war 8 months ago. His scales were dull. His posture was defeated. Behind him, images played on the chamber screens. Images of former Velthari territory now controlled by human forces. Images of the Velthari fleet, once the galaxy's most feared military, reduced to a handful of defensive ships around their homeworld. Minho entered the chamber, flanked by Admiral Doyen and Captain Hana. The three humans walked to their section with quiet confidence. No arrogance, no gloating, just the calm certainty of those who had won completely. The council leader, an ancient being whose species had been part of the council for 2,000 years, spoke first. "We are gathered to formalize the end of hostilities between humanity and the Velthari Empire. Ambassador Minho, please present your terms." Minho stood. He held a data pad, but he did not look at it. He had these terms memorized. He had been thinking about them since the first shots were fired. "The terms are simple," Minho began. "First, the Velthari Empire will immediately withdraw all military forces from the 4 occupied human colonies. They have 72 hours to complete this withdrawal. Second, the Velthari Empire will dismantle all offensive military capabilities. They may maintain defensive forces to protect their homeworld and core systems, but they will not have the capacity to wage offensive war. Third, the Velthari will pay reparations to the families of all human casualties and to rebuild the colonies they damaged." Murmurs spread through the chamber. These were harsh terms, but given what had happened, they were not unreasonable. Minho was not finished. "Fourth, the Velthari Empire will accept permanent monitoring by Galactic Council observers to ensure compliance with these terms. Fifth, the Velthari will surrender all occupied territories they have taken from other species in the past 50 years. Those territories will be returned to their original inhabitants or granted independence. And sixth, the Velthari Empire will formally recognize humanity as a Tier 1 galactic power, with all associated rights and privileges." The chamber exploded in shocked conversation. These terms went far beyond ending the human-Velthari conflict. They were dismantling the Velthari Empire as a galactic power. And they were elevating humanity to a status usually reserved for the oldest and most established species. Ambassador Krell looked like he might collapse. "These terms are... He could not finish. The words were too bitter. "They are merciful," Minho said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We could have destroyed your homeworld. We could have scattered your species across the galaxy as refugees. We could have done to you what you intended to do to us. We are not doing that. We are giving you a chance to survive and rebuild, but we are making sure you never threaten anyone again. The Council cannot allow one species to dictate terms to another like this." An ambassador from the Kresh Dominion protested. "It sets a dangerous precedent." Admiral Doyen stood. He was an old soldier, and his voice carried the weight of decades of military service. "The Council did nothing when the Velthari declared war on humanity without cause. The Council did nothing when they invaded our colonies. The Council did nothing when they killed our people. The Council watched and wondered who would win. Well, we won, and now you will watch while we ensure it never happens again." Thelvan, the observer who had studied the conflict, spoke up. "If I may address the Council, I have spent 8 months analyzing this war. I have reviewed human history and capabilities. I believe humanity is showing remarkable restraint given what they are capable of. These terms are harsh, yes, but they are survivable for the Velthari, and they are necessary for galactic stability." The Council leader considered for a long moment. "Ambassador Krell, does the Velthari Empire accept these terms?" Krell looked around the chamber as if hoping for support. None came. Every species was calculating their own position in this new reality. No one wanted to be the next target of human military power. "We accept," Krell finally said, the words seeming to physically pain him. Minho nodded once. "Then it is done. Admiral Doyen will coordinate the withdrawal from our colonies. Captain Hana will work with Council observers on the monitoring protocols. I will work with the Reparations Committee to ensure families are compensated fairly." Over the next 3 months, the terms were implemented. Velthari forces withdrew from human colonies. Jiho's intelligence services verified that Velthari offensive capabilities were being dismantled. Species that had been conquered by the Velthari decades ago suddenly found themselves free. Some returned to independence. Others joined defensive pacts with humanity, seeing humans as protectors rather than conquerors. The galaxy was changing, and at the center of that change was humanity. Yuna continued her research, but now other species were asking to collaborate. They wanted to learn human technology, They wanted to understand how humans had advanced so quickly. Yuna shared selectively, creating partnerships with species that shared human values. Technology became a bridge between humans and other civilizations. Sora became a trainer. Species across the galaxy wanted to learn human combat tactics, not to attack others but to defend themselves. Sora taught them, but she also taught them something more important. She taught them that strength without wisdom was dangerous. That military power should be the last resort, not the first choice. Taeyang led the first joint training exercises between human and alien pilots. His students came from a dozen different species. They learned to fly together, to fight together, to trust each other. A new generation of pilots who saw humanity not as enemies but as allies. Admiral Doyen established the Unity Fleet. It was not a human fleet. It was a combined fleet of multiple species, designed to respond to threats against any council member. Doyen commanded it, and under his leadership the fleet became the most powerful peacekeeping force the galaxy had ever seen. But it was used carefully only when needed, and always with council oversight. Captain Hana became Fleet Admiral of Expeditionary Forces. She led human ships into new areas of space, but not for conquest, for exploration, for trade, for establishing the same kind of peaceful relationships humanity had always wanted, and Minho remained as ambassador. 10 years after the war ended, he still represented humanity to the Council. But his role had changed. Species came to him for advice, for mediation, for help. Humanity had become, despite never wanting it, a leader among galactic civilizations. One day, a young ambassador from a newly spacefaring species approached Minho in the council halls. The being was nervous, clearly overwhelmed by the vast chamber and powerful species surrounding them. "Ambassador Minho," the young ambassador said, "my people have just joined the council. We are small. We are weak. We are afraid of the bigger species. How did humanity go from being dismissed by others to being respected? What is the secret?" Minho smiled gently. "There is no secret. We tried to be peaceful. We tried to be reasonable. We tried to build bridges instead of walls. But when war came to us, when we had no choice but to fight, we did so with everything we had. We showed the galaxy that peace is not weakness. It is a choice, and those who force peaceful people to make a different choice should be very afraid. But you are so powerful now," the young ambassador said. "You could conquer anyone you wanted. Why do you not?" "Because conquest is easy," Minho replied. "Any species with enough weapons and will can conquer. But building something better, something that lasts, something that brings different species together in cooperation instead of competition, that is hard. That is what we choose to do. Not because we are weak, but because we are strong enough to choose peace even when we could choose war." The young ambassador nodded slowly, understanding dawning in their expression. That evening, Minho stood on the observation deck of the human embassy, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships explored new systems. Human scientists worked on new discoveries. Human families lived on colonies that were growing and prospering. The war with the Velthari seemed like a lifetime ago, though it had only been 10 years. His communicator chimed. It was a message from Earth, from the Defense Council. They wanted his assessment of a new potential threat, a species in a distant sector that was making aggressive moves. They wanted to know if humanity should prepare for war. Minho composed his response carefully. Monitor the situation. Attempt diplomatic contact. Offer trade and cooperation, but make sure they know what humanity is capable of. Make sure they understand that we prefer peace, but we will not be bullied. Make sure they know that forcing humanity to fight is the worst mistake they could make. He sent the message and returned to watching the stars. Humanity had tried to leave war behind when they reached for space. The Velthari had forced them to remember what they were capable of, but they had also reminded humanity of something else. That strength used wisely is better than strength used often, that the most powerful weapon is the one you never have to fire. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humanity had taught it, and now the galaxy was better for it, not because humanity had conquered, but because humanity had shown that there was another way. A way where peace was chosen not from weakness but from strength, where different species worked together not because they had to but because they wanted to. In the end, that was humanity's greatest victory. Not the war they won, but the peace they built afterward. A peace that would last. A peace that would grow. A peace that would remind everyone that the best futures were not taken by force but built together. And if anyone ever forgot that lesson, well, humanity would be there to remind them, gently if possible, forcefully if necessary, but always with the same goal. Not domination, not conquest, but a galaxy where every species could live without fear, where peace was the rule, not the exception, where strength protected the weak instead of exploiting them. That was the legacy of the war with the Velthari. That was what humanity had built from the ashes of conflict, and that was what they would protect for as long as the stars shone.